So I run a fractional CFO group once a month for the FENG. And it's listed on the newsletter as a stop by my office event. And so I run one and Matt Budd runs one, very similar but different. So mine is what's the business like? And I'll go into a little bit more detail later. And Matt's is on how to set up basically a consulting company. So it's a little bit different, but they're both very good. And so what I tell people, we have presenters. We do 2 presenters per session. And one of the things I tell people is, you want to do business with people you know, like, and trust. And so we have a section in everybody's presentation called the Know, Like, and Trust section. And so I'm going to show you what that looks like. So this is me. So I grew up in Illinois, 2 brothers, 3 sisters. I'm the second oldest. My mother is 2nd generation Serbian. My father is 2nd generation English. I'm an Eagle Scout, and to get myself through college, I worked as, I met my movie guys. I worked as a cook, gas station attendant, house painter, all to get through college. And so this is my family. Those are my 2 sons and my daughter when she was graduating boot camp from the Marines. And that's my wife, Mary Ellen. And these are my 2 favorite family members. This is Dustin and Benny. Like I said, they were born since I've been here in Colorado over the last couple of years. And so we're going to be moving back there in 2023 to be part of their lives. And this is what I do for a hobby. So this is a canoe built out of an old deck that I found on the side of the road. So not only do I build wooden boats, but I try to build them with materials that are recycled. And so these are some surfboards that I built for my kids. And these were built out of an old redwood picnic table that I found on the side of the road as well. And then this is me. This is my career. So I've had a long career. I started off at Zenith Data Systems. Then I went to Thompson Industries, which is where I really learned how to become a diversified CFO. We had 15 small companies all over the United States, and my job was to keep them running smoothly. So I was actually a CFO, COO for Thompson Industries. And then I did fractional work, and I'll tell you more about how I got into that later on. But I did fractional CFO and COO. And actually, when I started it, there was no such a word as fractional CFO. And so I called it surrogate CFO, but obviously that didn't stick. But fractional is now the term. I worked for a couple of solar companies, Soteria Technologies. You see over there on the right, the 3 people with the escape respirators. So I actually have a patent on how to make those escape respirators. And so we started a company, but it didn't go anywhere because we were considerably underfunded. So I'm going to stick one more thing in the chat box. This is my website for, Art's here. Okay, so this is my website for the forecaster, and you'll find that there's a lot of interesting things on it. There's a lot of educational material. There's a lot of learning materials, a lot of my philosophies, which are all integral to how I do fractional work. There we go. Okay, and so now this is what I am. So, and I know there's probably a number of people here that are thinking about getting into fractional work and what is it, and what's it all about? How does it happen? And so I'm a CFO, COO, so operational CFO, but I really am just as much a CFO as I am a CFO. I've done fractional work for 20 years, worked at over 100 companies during that time frame. CPA, MBA. Those other initials have to do with COO. So I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, and I'm certified production inventory management, and always an Eagle Scout. So this is the journey. So this is where the journey begins. So I spent 15 years at Thompson Industries, and the CFO, COO role. This is a relatively good sized company, 315 million, and that was 20 years ago. So I don't know what it would be now, but there were 15 divisions located around the world. And so I became this small company expert. We had high compounded growth rate, 8 acquisitions, 4 startups, including 2 maquiladoras. And then we sold the business to Danaher, big conglomerate, in 2002, and I was out of a job. And so it turns out my fractional work was a desperation move. It wasn't a conscious thing where I said, I'm going to become a fractional CFO. And so this is how it happened. I was a small company expert with a big company salary. And so I was able to finally find a small company that would pay half my salary. And as they say, the rest is history. So I said, hey, look, pay half my salary. Let me go find somebody else that will. I'll get all your work done, no problem. You're a smaller company. I know how to do this. And so I actually found another job. So then I got, I did the typical thing. I said, I can do this, so I'll make a company out of this. And what was interesting, my strategy was to have the resources to do for unrelated companies what I did for the Thompson group of companies. So at Thompson, we had 2,000 people all over the world. So I could just pick up the phone and call somebody and find out, anything I needed to find out, get them over to another company to fix everything. And as I highlighted in yellow, this turned out to be the best part of what I did. And that's actually how I know Beth Granger, because I was always out looking for resources similar to what we do with the FENG, trying to network, find resources for people that I could bring into my clients. And so this is how I made it a reality, I call it. This is my business development. I'll give you kind of the journey. Because if you're thinking about doing this, everyone here on this presentation could probably do the work. But the problem is trying to find somebody, a customer. And so I answered job ads I said, and I would call people and I'd say, hey, look, you don't want a full-time person, you want me part-time. And I'll tell you this, never worked, by the way, but that's what I did. So if anybody's going to think about doing it, if it works for you, let me know. Then I networked with my Thompson contacts. So we had 15 companies all over the world. And when Danaher bought us, they kind of consolidated everything down. I networked with Thompson competitors and got some work there. I actually did cold calling, but I didn't do it myself. I was a typical financial person. I wasn't interested in picking up the phone and talking to people. And so I hired some cold callers, and they charged me, I don't know what it was, $40 an hour to call people. I gave them a list, I gave them a script, and it actually worked pretty well. I got a few clients out of that. I put together a flyer, sent that out, got a couple clients off of that. I belong to a tremendous amount of networking organizations, beyond the FENG. So these were organizations that were designed to allow, B2B groups to get to know each other. And then I did a lot of networking events, which I'll talk about. I did trade shows, actually had a booth at trade shows. Then I started to get referrals, which is where everything got smooth and easy for me. And I filled in the gaps with contract work. And so back then, LinkedIn, which you're going to hear about from Beth, was not a thing. And so it was really tough. You had to really scrape for connections and networking because there was no such thing as LinkedIn. And we weren't doing any of these virtual meetings where you could be on, be on for, half an hour or an hour and then move on to the next thing. It was a big commitment to go to networking events. And so while we're talking about networking, I'm going to give you a tip. since everybody here is part of a networking organization, this is the way I always looked at it and how it really played for me. And so it works for larger events, it works for small events, or even one-to-one networking. And so you see in red there, never leave a meeting without at least one referral. Referral includes one of four types. So for me, I was looking for business. So it was either a customer, what I called a marketing partner, a collaborator. So Beth is kind of between marketing partner and collaborator, but she's also a little bit of a resource for me to put in front of people that find her interesting. And so at a large event, I would say when I would go, because I used to say I have to pay for it, I would leave with 3 connections. On small events, I would leave with at least 1 connection. And so I'm an introvert, and a lot of financial people are by nature introverts. So it doesn't mean I don't like talking in front of people. It means I get my energy from being by myself and thinking about by myself, as opposed to being in an event. So when I would go to these large events, it was hard for me, especially after a day of work. But I would force myself to get 3 connections, one of the 4 types, and then I could leave. So it was like my reward for, doing the work that I had to do. The small events, where there would be like maybe 5 or 10 people, I'd try to leave with 1 connection and one-to-one, some sort of connection, or potentially a follow-up call or follow-up assignment where you meet with somebody, you say, hey, look, I'm going to go talk to Joe and I'll make sure that you 2 are connected. So this is really a key page. When I was a CFO, before I was a fractional CFO, I didn't have to leave my computer. I didn't have to leave my office. People knew who I was. Everybody was at my fingertips that I could call. And so networking is a skill that's imperative when you're doing fractional work. So I'm going to give you a couple of stories here of how I had to grow and develop into less of a financial executive and more of an entrepreneur. And so the first one is a guy that I met, Rich Burgess, and he was at my first ever networking event. And these are the kind of people that you hope you can run into when you're going down your journey. Somehow Rich knew I was lost at this event. I had no idea what to do. I just knew I had to be there. So he grabbed me out of the place, pulled me to the bar, bought me a drink, and began to tell me how to work the room, which I had no idea what that even meant at the time. And then he brought me inside and introduced me to some of the key contacts that I still have today. So this guy is one of those guys that made a big impact on my journey. Then this one is Ellen Volpe from Long Island. She runs a networking group called ABA. And so, my typical way of learning things is to buy a bunch of books, read the books. When they all start to sound the same, then I figure out that maybe I understand it. And so I read the book, and she sat next to me at a networking event, and I gave her my card, and I said, look, I'd like to practice networking with you. And so it was funny because she gave me her card, and she said, call me. And so I did, and she set me up, and as I went to her groups, and they actually taught me how to do networking, which again was a very hard thing for me to understand that I really didn't know. And so she set me up for successful networking for, it's now over 20 years that I've been doing it. And then I met, I don't know if anybody here has ever heard of Sandler Sales, but yeah, I knew I had to become a salesman. And so I took Sandler Sales, which is really a great thing to do because it fits the financial mind, because it's a process, it's logical, it's steps. It's not, trying to smooth somebody. It's really trying to go through a process. And so I met this guy, Rich Isaac, at the Rich Burgess networking event, the first one I talked about. And so we talked about sales training. He invited me to participate, and it really set me up as to what do I do when I get a customer? How do I close a deal? It's really, and there's a book I'm going to show you later on. You don't have to necessarily go to Sandler. You can read the books. And then this guy here, Krish Rajan, he taught me, I met him through Ellen, and he spent hours with me. He was like, I wouldn't call him a business coach, but he was my marketing coach. And he helped me understand what I was, what my brand was, all really critical things. You can't, when I went out from being a CFO out into the world of doing this kind of work, I would go to these events and I'd think, well, of course they're going to talk to me. I'm Jeff, because I was a big executive. So, but nobody really cares. And so he taught me how to position myself, and I would go to his house. He would do this coaching at his house, and I would go to his house and he would give me assignments, and I'd come in and he would just shake his head at me because I was all excited because I said, "Hey, I understand this," and he would shake his head, and obviously I didn't. But after like 6 months of him just pushing me, it was uncomfortable, but I finally got to where I needed to be. Okay, so a fractional CFO, your new reality. You take when you're a fractional CFO, you're not a consultant. So that's one thing I want to really get clear. People think it's okay, I'm going to do part-time work, I'm going to do project work. You can, but that's not what a fractional CFO is. A fractional CFO means you're really a CFO, but you're only going to spend a little bit of time at each company because they really don't need a full CFO all the time. And so you take the seat of the financial leader for a company that needs you. So right now I have, I'm working at a company in Denver where I'm actually full-time, but it ends this year because I don't like it, but I needed it. They needed me to do it, and it worked. But I also have 2 clients. So I have 2 fractional clients, and for both of them, I'm on their website as their CFO. So, you end up with a whole bunch of roles. So you're not a consultant and you're not a contract employee, but what you are is what is good CFO is. You're a mentor, you're a teacher, but what I say most importantly, you are a driver. So what does that mean to me? So I tell people, I show them this. I said, this is what it looks like when you're running a business. But this is what it looks like when you're driving a business. And so, as the CFO, we know the numbers, we're looking out into the future, we're doing forecasts, and so we're helping them drive a business. So this is what it looks like running a business, not too cool, and this is what it looks like driving a business. So your new reality. And by the way, when you're doing all this stuff, you also have to run your own business. So you're not only somebody's CFO, but you're running your own business. So you're also an entrepreneur. So the more entrepreneurial books you can read, the better. So these are the types of independent CFO work there are. And I see I'm using the word independent as opposed to fractional for this slide. So you can be a fractional CFO where you're independent like me. You don't work for another company. You can be a fractional CFO that's run by where you can run a group of CFOs. There's a lot of people out there that are doing that now. You can be a fractional CFO where you work for one of those groups. And so, there's advantages for each. When you're working for a group, you don't have to get your own business a lot of times. They'll give you leads, but then you don't make as much money when you're doing the work. You can work for fractional CFO franchises. There's a bunch of them out there, B2B CFO and things like that. So there's lots of different types of work. You could be a contract CFO. I don't use the word fractional. That means you're coming in for a period of time. Or you can do contract project work where you're a consultant. And I'll give you a really good example where that made a big difference in my career. I actually did it one time, almost as a lark, just because I had some time, and it's paid dividends ever since. So my business model, I use 1099 help. So if I need some extra work, I'll bring on somebody to work with me. I charge by the month. So $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 a month, depending on the complexity of the client. A lot of guys go out there and they say, I'm going to charge you $250 an hour, or I'm going to charge you $300 an hour. I don't believe in it because my market is a $2 million to $25, $30 million company. If I go in to talk to a CEO and tell him I'm going to charge him $250 an hour, the first thing he does is say, okay, there's 2,000 hours in a year. And so therefore you're going to make 500,000 a year and I'm making 180. And so it really turns people off in my market. Now, if you're going up market, where you're working for, the, $50 million to $150 million company, they're used to paying consultants a higher rate, but then knowing what the hourly rate is, but then you're going to be more of a consultant than a CFO. And so just to put this in perspective, this one that I have one now that I'm charging $3,000 a month, and I meet with them for 1 hour a week. So 4 hours of work, and I get $3,000. So just, so you can make whatever you want to make, but this is why I do it this way. I have a statement of work I use to keep the scope where it needs to be, and I'll share that. If you guys want this presentation, you can add the statement of work. I consider myself a national organization, and I'm going to talk to you about my software. I put my website in the chat, but all my customers buy my software, $2,400 a year. And it's a financial planning and analysis software. All right, so I'm going to talk about LinkedIn for a minute and social media. And again, when Beth talks to you, she'll probably do a much better job of this. But so I use ActiveCampaign. So I have a CRM that I put people in. I do weekly posts on LinkedIn of articles that I write. And so you see in red where it says be real, focused, and consistent. That means, a lot of people when they're doing LinkedIn, they want to steal articles from other people and post them. That's not a good idea, really. What you want to do is they want to be articles that you write. It takes a little while, but it's like I'll write a 2-page article and I'll get, 6, 7 posts out of it because I take little, snippets out of it and post it that way. And so twice a month, I send a note on Fractional CFO meeting that I chair. The FENG Denver chapter chair, always virtual. And then monthly Fractional CFO meeting, which is also virtual. And I get people from all over the US and sometimes from overseas at it. So there's my statement of work. I'm not going to go over that, but you can see I have weekly, bi-monthly, monthly, and annual deliverables. Okay, I'm going to show you this. It's a 2-minute video. It won't take too long here. But this is on my website, and it's all about my software.
Using Excel-based FP&A tools for 30 years, we have finally been able to harness the power of APIs, simple-to-build database apps, and pre-programmed front-end apps to build a cost-effective, robust version of an FP&A tool. Over the years, this process has been used by CFOs in over 100 companies. Now it's time to pass it on to you. The system is designed to be shared. Permissions can be granted to control access to employee data. And don't worry, there are no limits on users, and unlike Excel, nobody can break it. Let's start with the employee module. For most companies, employee costs are between 60 and 90% of operating expenses. so we made the employee module extremely powerful. Simply copy and paste your entire population of employees into the table, and then populate the remaining fields with the drop-downs. The system will automatically generate and maintain a 24-month forecast of employee costs. At the heart of the system is the N+ report worksheet. Every month, we sync with QuickBooks to pull in the year-to-date actual. Then we sync with the prior forecast to pull in the most recent forecast as a starting point. And finally, we sync with the employee data from the employee module. The user then updates the forecast by copying and pasting from an Excel forecasting model, adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing right in the cells, or manually punching in and copying over data. Forecaster has a presentation report that has comparisons to the budget, the prior year, and the prior forecast. The comparisons are for the current month, year to date, and the full year. We hope you have found a look behind the curtains useful. Please feel free to set up a 30-minute demo or just connect with us to ask some questions. Check out our lifetime "We will be there for you" guarantee on the website. If you decide to use our product, and we hope you will, we will not let you fail. Thank you from the team at Forecaster.
Okay. There we go. Okay. So the software was designed around the expensive FP&A systems. This was designed for small companies where you don't have necessarily the depth of talent, but it does about 80 to 85% of what they do, only it's, you know, a very small price compared to it. And it's very, I can get somebody up and running and have in like an hour on the system, and it works really, really slick. Okay. So I have a fractional CFO FENG meeting that I do. So it's on Eventbrite. It's the third Thursday of the month, 3:45 to 5 Eastern time. And again, we spotlight one partner resource and spotlight one member. And I'll also meet with small groups as needed. And so this is the kind of stuff we go through. So, you know, digital marketing, networking techniques, all these kind of things are the things that we do at this meeting. So it's designed, it's really a nice community. So if it's a little bit lonely being a fractional CFO because you don't work for another company. And so this is a company full of peers. It's also people that come to see what it's all about, or that they're just starting. And it gives all kinds of resources. And then once I get a little bit of time after I'm done with this assignment that I'm on, I'll post a lot of those meetings and info on my website. So this next section, if you really want to be a fractional CFO, or even this actually applies even to, some of it applies to just regular CFO, but these are some reading materials that I would really recommend if you're going to get into fractional work. And, you know, the best thing is if you have a couple of years while you're kind of winding down your career and you want to do this afterwards, now's the time to really get involved and read the materials. And so remember I talked about the Sandler pyramid or summary, sorry. And this, you know, selling professional services the Sandler way. It's all in there. It's an easy to read book. And so why you should read it? Because you can't survive unless you can sell. It's easy to read, logical, process driven, perfect for the typical financial mindset. And if you want more, there's another book called Sandler Rules. And if you even want to read more, there's another really good book that's mandatory, I think it is, for the B2B CFO. It's called Integrity Selling. And so they make sure all of their members read that book and understand it. Great book. Now this one, again, because I'm an introvert, this was one of my favorite books to read. And typically we're all introverts. That's why we gravitate towards the financial world. Otherwise we'd be salesmen. It's easy to read, helps you navigate the networking comfortably. And this is where I learned a lot of my tricks. Again, it's logical, process driven, and perfect for the mindset. If you want more, there's a book, join a network group designed to teach networking. So this book stands on its own, but and there's different kinds of networking groups. You want to join one that actually teaches networking, not one of these that trades leads. So this is another really good book, To Know Yourself. You want to know yourself because we're all different and we're all enlisted by different types of people to do the work for them. So you want to know why people want to do business with you. Again, there's a really cool online assessment that you should take. You read the book, the assessment is free, and find out more about yourself. And I also did this. I hired a coach that specialized in DISC assessment, which is another similar thing. It's a little bit more expensive to go through that, but they really help you understand, again, what you are, what motivates you, why people gravitate towards you, and all those things. This one is FENG member, Phil Varley. Failure is not an option. And it's a good book around cash flow, which is, so I'm going to give you another thing to think about. I have never been hired by anybody that wasn't in trouble. And so the only reason people ever brought me in was because there was a problem with their business. And so this is a really good book to outline some really nice, easy to understand things that you can do. And then there's another really good book called Cash Rules. Now this book is another, is Jeff on? No, he's not on this call. Anyway, Jeff is another FENG member. And this is the best book I have ever read in any of the business books I've ever read. And it's called, Corporate Turnaround Artistry. When I read the stories that he tells, it's like he followed me around. So if you really want to see what it's really like to be a fractional CFO, he calls it turnaround. But, when we're hired by people, generally speaking, like I said, they have problems. And so we're really turnaround people. And if you want to read more, read it again. It's that good. And then these are some other books. So Art's here on the call. But Art wrote this book. He's a FENG member. This Managing by Harold Janine is, it's an old school book. He ran ITT from the early 60s to sometime in the 70s. And it's really old school, but some of his philosophies have stuck with me forever. And I teach them to people. I don't necessarily let them read the book because it would turn them off. It's that old school, but his points and the way he does things is fantastic. So anyway, the other three are kind of speak for themselves a little bit, but they're good books. So this is my website, which has, you can see up at the top, it has a learning center. And so I've got some videos on there I did and some other references. There's a lot of good material there. And so these are just some of the videos that I did. Now, we're getting near the end, and I'm going to tell you this story. So this is from Fargo, if any of you recognize it. This is a true story. So this is what I call my you never know story. And this is, so in a typical CFO job, you would never get opportunities like you can get as fractional. I was talking to a friend of mine that I worked with like 30 some years ago. I was telling him, I'm actually not as much a CFO anymore as I am an entrepreneur. And so it really changes you in a really great way. So here's what happened. So I had some additional time. So I took a consulting role with Robert Half. just literally to fill my time because I was doing something else and there was a gap. And so I said, all right, I'm going to fill up my time doing this. And it was with a solar company. I knew nothing about solar, didn't even care about solar, thought it was ugly. But they wanted me to come in and clean up their QuickBooks. And so, they did these residential, you can see a picture of it on here. And so then they became a client, after a while, they became a true fractional client. I wasn't there just as a hired gun to clean up their QuickBooks. So I became their CFO and I continued to work on my escape respirator company at the time. And that's a fun story, but we don't have time for that. And so then I was recruited to be the CFO for a solar company in New York City. So I had to stop being a fractional because this was a really great opportunity. I had a good equity position. They wanted to pay me a lot of money. I always wanted to work in New York City. I just thought it would be fun. So I kind of dropped my other clients and did it. And they provided rooftop solar on commercial buildings. And my like I said here, my escape respirator venture kind of fizzled out anyway at the time. So now I'm doing that. I'm getting all this solar experience. But then they started to struggle and there was nothing I could do to help them. My equity would never materialize. And right at that same time, I was really getting kind of disturbed that I went there and left my fractional work behind. I was contacted by a fund to help them with one of their portfolios because this is interesting. It was such a new business at the time, solar was, that I was viewed as an expert because I had 5 years of experience, but also I was a longtime seasoned CFO. So then when they talked to me because of my fractional work and because of my solar work, they didn't even want to talk to anybody else. They had a great company that was growing out of control. And I was brought in to get it under control and sell it. We sold it in 2021. And this time I had an equity position and I actually made some money on that. So that was, and that's why we did that in June of 2021. And then I was asked by the new buyers to stay on and help them move to a new business model around solar. So that's what I'm still doing here. But this is what's really cool. Right now, I have the 2 clients. I have 2 other ones that I'm working with that are going to be, they're not officially clients. They do a little work for them, but once I go back to New York in 2023, they'll be clients of mine. And everything is traceable back to Robert Half Consulting. That one job I took just as a lark. And so, it just amazes me that all of this, including coming out here and getting that equity position and all, were all because of that one decision to take a little bit of contract work and take a little bit of risk. And so that's me. And that's the end of the presentation. Now I see I have
Jeff?
yes.
Just one thing, thank you so much for your presentation. And before we open it up to questions, I just want to make a point. One of the things that we used to do at our FENG meetings was to have a structured networking piece. And in anticipation of maybe resurrecting that, I had asked representatives from, it's interesting that you mentioned Robert Half because I believe there is someone from Robert Half represented here. I also asked some of our, one of the ways in which the Chicago chapter operated of FENG is our meetings when we were doing physical meetings were at firms like Robert Half, the Addison Group, Sallow, etc. And so I reached out to various of those companies and asked them to join us tonight with a view towards resurrecting our structured networking piece. So any one of the attendees this evening that's in a job search situation and would like the benefit to simply do their elevator pitch or just tell us what they're looking for, we're happy to stay on for as long as you have those sorts of ideas and needs. So with that, let me throw it back to you. I wanted to get that out at the beginning of the meeting, and I fumbled it. So, but open up for questions to Jeff. Have at it.
Yeah, so one thing real quick. Could anybody that is, who's a fractional CFO? And I know a lot of you have your screens off. I know Tariq. So sorry, hey, keep your hand up for just a second so I can see who you are. Okay, great. Who's thinking about becoming a fractional CFO sometime? Okay, so I really invite you to come to my my Thursday meetings. You'll find it really interesting, and you know, I'm just one of many. And Tariq actually belongs to a group where I think there's like 22 fractional CFOs in that group. So you know, there's a lot of us floating around, and everybody is you know, interested in helping the next person with what they're doing. So I see somebody wanted to share briefly a case as an example. I can do that if you're interested. I have a really cool case study. Do I have like 5 more minutes to do that?
Sure.
Okay. Let me just find it. There it is. All right. So let's see here. Get rid of this one. Sure. Okay. You can all see that? Yes? Okay. So this is so this is another true story. Anyway, this is a sheet metal company that I worked with. And so the company profile is 10 million in revenue, 100 employees, pretty good sized manufacturing facility. The key here is that it was owned by 3 brothers. The 4th brother is their CPA. They inherited the business from their father, so you can probably see where this is going to go. 4 of their sons worked in the business, so it was totally family, and they were at odds with each other, and so it had been deteriorating for years when I got there. And so when I go into a company, I have this, so because I'm a Lean Six Sigma black belt, we learn about the 5 S's. And so, you know, the first S is sort, set in order, shine, standardize, and then sustain. And you can see how I related to financials. You know, so basically, whenever I go into a company, I have to triage, meaning find out what the heck's going on and figure out how much cash they're going to have for the next X period of time, and what can we do to get things going. So when I got there, under the triage section, they wanted me to get them a loan. That's the way it started. And so I looked at their books and I said, you know what, there's no way anybody's going to give you a loan, but I can help you get your company ready for a loan if you think you need a loan, but you got to fix the company up a little bit first. So I came back in a week later and into the conference room, and their brothers were sitting there, and I thought somebody died. And I said, what happened? And they said, they're going out of business. And so I analyzed the situation. Fortunately, sheet metal, if you've ever worked in a sheet metal company, the cost of the material is very little compared to the value added that's put into it. So it's mostly people cost in their company. And so I provided them with a structuring plan and helped them implement it. So we got them out of trouble. We laid off a lot of people, and then we set up I set up a financial model around what was happening. And so then set an order. So I, put in some normal financial practices, what we would call normal, but in these smaller companies, there is no normal. It's just, they just kind of evolve. And so, I organized their pipeline and started pipeline reviews. They did not do that. I had somebody ask me one time when I gave this presentation, they said, you mean they actually let you set up their pipeline and manage their pipeline? I said, yeah, they weren't doing it. So we did it, and we got some visibility as to what was happening. 13-week cash flow, put in some inventory and purchasing controls and headcount controls. So we had everything got kind of settled down, and we were able then to look into the future. And so shine and standardize. I put in a 5-day close, standard reporting, and I got a cadence of business meetings going. So if you ever, when you look at the last presentation, you look at my statement of work, you'll see that it mirrors this. This is what I do. This is what these smaller companies need. The basics, we consider them basics. To them, it's really advanced stuff, but it has to be put in place to get everything under control. Now, sustain. You go to the root cause problem solving. So the first section in blue here is the manufacturing process. This is where it gets pretty interesting. So if you've ever been in a manufacturing facility that does sheet metal, it looks like this. So this one is actually organized, but you can see how chaotic it looks. And theirs was so bad. Remember this game?
Yeah.
Right? Well, theirs was so bad that in order to move a pallet, you had to move things around in order to get to that pallet and then move things back around to put them together. So we had to do that. And that's actually when I got to work. I have 3 children, as you saw. All 3 of them worked there with me on this assignment to help get their factory cleaned up. So that was real good benefit for me. They did things like this. This wasn't from their factory, but this could have been from their factory. I saw this all the time. Safety, and they didn't care. Nobody cared about anything. And this isn't from their back of their lot, but again, if I had taken a picture, you would have seen exactly the same picture of pallets. So there was no pride in what they were doing. All right, so we fixed it. We got that all straightened up, but then the management team was part of the problem. And so 3 brothers. So sometimes it looked like this, or sometimes it looked like this, and one time it looked like this. And so this was bad. We had to get them under control. Unfortunately, there was a friend of mine that knew them as well, and we brought him in, and we had a weekend retreat where we literally taught them how to get together and how to manage themselves together and how to get behind their business and become leaders of a company. So we used this book as the model for it. And we sold the company 4 years later for over $20 million. But I didn't have an equity position. So sad story at the end. Anyway, so that's a case study of that's typical of what I see. So hopefully that helps. Any other questions? So where is Art? I don't see Art. Oh, he's probably on the other page. Oh. Okay.
So Jeff, when you, one of the things I think that people will think about, and you touched on it earlier in your presentation, is when you alluded to the fact that you had some extra time Clearly, when you are an entrepreneur, and when you actually have clients and you're working, you have little time for marketing. And clearly, when you have lots of time for marketing, you probably are not drawing any income. So how do you wrestle with that?
Yep. So that's why my business model is different than being a consultant. So if you're a consultant, or and you do project type work, it's good work, and it's fun, it's interesting. But if you're doing project work, that's when you're tied down for the whole period of time. So with my work, remember what I said, I have right now 2 clients, and so between the 2 of them, I'm making almost 100,000 a year, 2 clients. And one of them I spend 4 hours a month, and the other one I probably spend 8 hours a month on. And so your business model, if you're going to do contract work, you're always going to run into that problem that you're talking about. And the other thing is, like, once I get some time back in 2023, I'll probably ramp this up a little bit. And that's where I use 1099 work. So there's a lot of people that, like yourselves, that want to get into fractional work, but they haven't experienced how to get the customers, or they don't really even understand quite fractional work. So just imagine you're a CFO, you're working for one company, and Tyreek can tell you all about this, but you're working for one company. It's different than all of a sudden now you have 5 companies that you're working for, that you're their CFO. It's not that it can't be done, but it's a skill set. So it's beyond being able to just be a CFO. You have to be a CFO and manage their expectations for 5 different customers at a time. So I can hire people like that want to learn the business and will work for me as a 1099. And so that's how I juggle the whole thing. Because I started off doing what you're talking about, and that did not pan out too well. So I changed it over the time.
Other questions for Jeff?
So some of you I've seen before. Who here has seen me before at these meetings? Anybody? Yeah, I know Melissa, yes. And Tariq. And Michael, yes. And Jerry, I'm pretty sure you and I talked once before, but maybe not. Okay, anyway. Yeah, so hopefully that helped. Connect with me. If you're really thinking about doing this, you come to my meetings, and if you connect with me, I'll get you on the, I'll put you in my active campaign. You'll get 2 emails from me a month, so you don't have to worry about tons of emails. And it'll talk about it's all about the meeting that we're having and what we're going to talk about and how to connect to it. So, and if you want to meet with me one-on-one and talk about that, I'll do that too. No problem.
Hey, Jeff, is that the FENG meetings that you're talking about on Thursdays?
Yeah, it's my FENG. So it's in the newsletter under stop by my office.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so the link is there.
Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Anybody else? It's 6 o'clock your time. It's usually at 5 o'clock I go on my Peloton, but I can hold off for a little while. If there's any questions.
Jeffrey, hey, this is Chris White with Robert Half Management Resources. I just had a quick question for you. Are you noticing a little bit of an uptick in demand for your service, or even people being available, just because of what we're seeing in the labor market with, 11.5 million jobs open, and the quit rate has also reached an all-time high. So people are quitting jobs. There's more unfilled jobs than we've ever seen before. Have you noticed an uptick on your end in business?
Yeah, absolutely. There's so the group that Tariq is from, it's a Florida group. They've got lots and lots of work, and it's flourishing. I'm finding people are actually looking for fractional CFOs. You know, that the last couple of years that's been happening for me. I had never seen it before, but they're actually looking for the word a fractional CFO. Yeah, there's lots of work out there for it. So you know, everybody, like I say, everybody here knows how to do the work. It's how you manage the whole situation is the hard part.
Great presentation, by the way, and thank you for the nice, kind words on Robert Half. Your check's in the mail.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Yeah. So I know the people on Long Island, just so you know where I come from with them. Good people. Yeah. Yes, and yes, here's how you get the presentation. I'm going to put my LinkedIn thing in there again. It's actually at the top of the chat. If you link in with me on LinkedIn, I will get you my presentation. How's that? Anybody that wants it, just let me know. Link in with me, and it's all yours.
Jeff, let's talk a little bit about your forecaster and your software, because that's one of the things that's near and dear to my heart. Is and I see where you're coming from in terms of sort of amalgamating the actual with a revised forecast. But all forecasting is uncertain. And so my question is, how do you deal with uncertainty in your software in terms of, well, across the whole gamut? In other words, obviously, there are forecasts of volume that you need to consider for the remaining periods, months of the period being forecasted, as well as costs, and so on and so forth. So how do you deal with uncertainty? And then maybe offline, I certainly would like to connect with you and talk about some things that might be useful to you and your clients.
Yeah. So the only way, I guess I don't think of it as dealing with that. I guess I'm dealing with uncertainty in a different way. I'm thinking, so the software that I have is really based on everything I've ever done for the last 40 years, and many other CFOs doing the same thing that have I've crossed paths with or worked with. So what I do is I believe that you should reforecast every month. And so by bringing in the actual, comparing it to the forecast you just did, understanding what the differences are, making a judgment call at that point. Should I be reforecasting, or was that just a one-time blip? And then reforecast. And so the system that I have actually saves all the forecasts. And so, it just piles them up. So you can always go back to where you were, and it rolls forward as well. So you bring in the actual, you roll the forecast from the prior period, and now you got a starting point. You say, should I adjust it? So I believe that by constantly adjusting and learning and teaching the clients what happened last month and why is it different than what we expected and what can we do to change that? That's what I call driving the business. So it's not, the way I use these words with people, I'm not trying to offend anything, but I say we're not weathermen. We're here to change the direction of where the company looks like it's going. So I don't care if I forecast it correctly. I want to use it to learn our expectation. So when I do a forecast, my expectation is this is where I think it's going to go. And if it doesn't go that way, I want to know, and I want to know why, and I want to know what we can do to fix it and change it. So that's just the way I look at forecasting over the years. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I love the idea that you guys are gonna move into more networking stuff. It's always good, you know. That's why I do these presentations. I just want to meet people. And, you know, so again, you know, feel free to reach out to me. So who's Tariq. So Tariq's been doing this a long time. So just, if you ever get a chance to talk to him, so you should connect with him, you should talk to him. Because he knows, you know, you get a new perspective from other than what I just gave you on doing fractional work.
Thanks, Jeff. Jerry, can I just jump in just for a quick minute about marketing versus delivery and how to balance the two things out?
Sure.
A quick 10-second version on my part. First of all, I don't commit myself more than what I can deliver, obviously, and I do keep Fridays open. My marketing is done mainly on Fridays, lunch meetings, phone calls, catching up with potential clients, bankers where I get most of my leads, and lately private equity. So I would say block a certain amount of time, maybe 4 hours a week, maybe 8 hours a week. It pays you dividends down the road because you can't run this business without being an entrepreneur, just like Jeffrey was saying. So that's my couple of cents worth of advice right off the bat.
Yep.
Good.
My model is slightly different than Jeff's. I do bill by the hour, but most of the time it's a great idea to get in on a fixed fee basis. It's your foot in the door. And normally they think they only need you for 10 hours a month, for example, and they'll do a number and they say, can you work for that? And you say, okay, I would. And then they realize 10 hours a month is actually 10 hours a week. And then obviously you have a second sitting with them. By that time you have developed some rapport. You probably had some conversations on various stages that the company is in. And then you say, guys, this is not working, or it's unlikely to work at that rate unless I get you another person on 1099 basis. And that kind of discussion takes place. And if they still want you to be working with them at like by yourself rather than 1099 basis, you say, okay, then it's going to be base plus hour or whatever combination you can come up with. And it seems to work. At least it has worked for me. And I've been doing this for about 15 years now.
Yeah.
Again, feel free to reach out to me. I put my information in the chat and so on, and re-look at Jeffrey's slides. They're amazing. I've been forwarding Jeff's slides to my friends who are interested in going into this, and I haven't paid any royalty to Jeff yet, so I hope Jeff doesn't mind. But
yeah. So by the way, the perfect scenario for everybody on here that wants to be a fractional CFO. A differentiator is I have this really cool software that allows me to do FP&A at a really inexpensive rate. And so everybody on here, if you're a fractional CFO, you could buy my software for $100 a month. And it hooks right into QuickBooks, and it's really slick, and it's a differentiator. So that's just a little plug for my software.
absolutely.
I'll even show you how to use it.
Wonderful. Any other questions for Jeff? Well, Jeff, I want to thank you. I'm sure we all learned significantly from your presentation, and we will take advantage of your offer to connect and at least get a hold of copies of your slides and the presentation, and take the opportunity to connect with you.
Yeah, by the way, your meeting next time sounds extremely interesting. Think like a comedian, act like a leader. I love it.
Think like a comedian. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, I love it. So I'm going to be there. So if any of you guys are going to be there, I'll see you next month.
Great. David Horning is the guy's name. And so it should be a treat for all of us.
Yep.
Well, thank you. Again, the floor is open for anyone that wants to talk about what they're looking for in terms of their elevator pitch, or just companies that you want to connect with, et cetera, so that we can at least collectively indicate whether or not we know anybody, opportunity to get in touch with this one or that one, et cetera. So floor is open. Just come off mute and holler at me.
Hi, Jeff, Jerry, and everyone. I have a question, and maybe looking for expert opinion. Jeff and Tariq, we had one-on-one. I appreciate your time, but I'm in a position where I'm fundamentally a corporate, CFO, CEO type role. Haven't really done much of fractional work, but I had obtained some pretty good experience in past 3 years in more like a startup, private equity type manufacturing business, where I was able to outsource my team overseas and essentially, be able to save 75% of my department cost. And while doing that, I was also able to get a lot of good experience under my belt as how the offshore teams works, and how to have cybersecurity and financial controls. So I'm at a point where I'm considering jumping ship to more of into, and I'm not sure if I really want to be fractional CFO type role where I'll be limited to selling my time, but doing some sort of hybrid approach of doing initially maybe some fractional work to fill in my time, but fundamentally provide a cheap labor with regards to white collar and accounting type folks. So what would be your advice for me, who's essentially shifting from a typical corporate world to more of it's almost like running a business onto consulting, fractional CFO side?
Well, first, the first thing you said was you were, do I get it right, that you were employed by a private equity firm?
Yes. Well, I'm basically working in a manufacturing company. It's just around 150 employee company who's owned by a private equity. So yes, I have relationship with private equity, but I'm on the industry side.
Okay, so obviously, to my way of thinking, that might be your first avenue of approach. Is what other clients does the private equity firm have with the, where they could utilize your services?
Yeah, makes sense.
Anybody else have any offers for Irfan? I have that right? Pronunciation right?
Yes, sir. Irfan. Yeah.
Okay. Anybody else?
So we've already talked, so that's why I'm not bringing anything up. I've already talked to her friend before. He had enough of my suggestions.
Yeah, no, thanks, Jeff. I think it's interesting to get overall perspective, especially I think a lot of folks on this call have some good experience under their belt, and I'm in a transition phase, so I appreciate insights.
Well, also the thing that occurs to me is if you have subject matter expertise, you ought to pursue that line of thinking as well. In other words, at least in the business that you are currently involved, there, any specifics that you could take to competitors, similarly situated companies, etc. So that would be another avenue of approach, if you will, to your next assignment.
Yep, makes sense.
Other comments, thoughts, or anybody else?
Well,
No,
my name is John, by the way. I have a
Yes.
comment, if that's okay.
Sure.
Sure. I do most of my work through a company in New York. I just moved to Chicago, out in Naperville. I used to live in Chicago 20 years ago. We decided to move back here. And most of the work in my history is being a CFO for many years, for different companies. But most of the work that we get would require me as the CFO, or whatever capacity we're helping the client at, to have a significant level of Excel expertise, data expertise. And throughout my history or knowledge of a lot of other CFOs, if you've been a CFO in a company for a long time, a lot of them don't necessarily acquire that significant Excel expertise, because you have other people in the company that can kind of do it for you. When you come out into the consulting world, I mean, it was asked if who does fractional CFO, and I raised my hand. I said yes, but in reality, it's more consulting of various things. Sometimes it's fractional CFO. Sometimes we're coming in, we're helping the CFO. Companies are experiencing problems, cash flow problems, and need some help. And so I just want to throw that out there. Are you guys that are familiar with the fractional CFO situation? Do you feel that way also, that or see that also, that your skills in Excel probably should be pretty good in most cases?
Yeah. Yeah, they don't have to be, super high end, but they have to be pretty darn good.
Yeah.
I always tell people, so I work in smaller companies, remember? So I
Yeah.
always tell people that they can't program in Excel,
Right.
no macros in that, because then you can't pass it on to anybody.
Yeah.
But you have to be able to do a lot of the other database things like VLOOKUPs and
Absolutely.
and
Summit, yep.
you know how to set it all up. And you'll find that one of the reasons is you go into a company and their systems are really usually pretty lousy.
Yep.
And so a lot of times you end up just exporting a big database from their system and then having to manipulate that yourself. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of the work that I do, a lot of time we have to download a lot of data. And sometimes when I get through with helping the client and the client is thanking me for the help I gave them, I said, I don't even know how I did it. I mean, it just starts clicking when you're doing it, start seeing relationships and figuring out what you have. And it's like one of these things, when you're done with this, say, oh my God, I hope I don't have to do that again. But then you wind up doing it again in another client.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you do it every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, John,
Hey, John.
would your example, I guess I'm asking this to Jeff, would that qualify as requiring some 1099 assistance to get to a level of proficiency, or at least get the data in such a fashion that you can then deal with it and make some intelligent assessment of what it is that you're trying to resolve?
Yeah, you can do it that way. Usually though, you don't have time. You got to move fast.
Yep, I agree with Jeff.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then also, if I may, when you have a separate person that comes in that really knows Excel well, you sometimes you lose that connection between being a very experienced, CFO, financial person, and what needs to be done on the fly as you're figuring things out. As you're looking at the data that the client gave you, and you're looking at their various headings and make sense of them and trying to develop a relationship between that and this. Sometimes, because I'm in a situation where we do have other people that I can pass things off to, that, also know Excel, but, sometimes we lose that, as the fractional CFO, as you're going through their data, you're also learning about the business. And to the point, I think that Jeff mentioned earlier, a lot of situations you go into, they're really messed up to begin with, and that's why you're there. I mean, I don't know how it is in, let's say, in a true fractional CFO, because I wouldn't call myself a true fractional CFO. I get called into jobs when companies, when they're in trouble. Either their lender strongly suggested that they give me a call, and very often companies like that already went through staffing problems for a while. So.
Yep. Oh, yeah, you're articulating it very well. That's pretty much the standard for me. You're talking about. Yep.
Yeah. So much. And another thing that I make sure that I do, it's almost a fear in going into a company who has had problems for a while, and especially with defecting financial staff. And sometimes they're very left with that one or two person that, oh my God, if they leave, the company's really in bad shape. And you as a fractional CFO, doesn't have that corporate historical knowledge that you don't want that person to go. So I bend over backwards as Mr. Nice Guy, and that happens to be the way I am anyway. Like that doesn't go against my personality anyway. And but I do everything possible to make sure that, I guess, what was the original Star Trek on television. I don't know about the movies later on, but I like the original Star Trek. I think that one of their missions was like to do no harm, or to, when they go into places, that's one of my things, do no harm. Because very often when you go in there, you have financial staff that almost sometimes resents it that you had to bring someone in. Or even sometimes you find a relatively junior person who maybe had loyalty to someone else who's no longer there, was asked to leave, so you have to make sure you get the respect and the help and of the staff, and make sure that you don't do anything to make them feel like they want to move.